Yeah, let's start the discussion. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever in the world you are joining us from today. I'm sure you are having a great time. Let me ask you something before we ever begin. How many of you have sat through an AI strategy presentation in the last few months and thought, this sounds great, but where are the actual results? So if you're not alone in this journey. Every enterprise leader we talk to from AI Core Spot side is asking the same version of the same question. We have experimented, we have piloted, we have proven the concept. So how do we actually scale this into measurable business outcomes? And that's exactly why we all are here today to discuss about the same. Welcome to today's webinar, Beyond Experimentation, Scaling AI for Measurable Business Outcomes. I'm genuinely excited about this one. Let me begin by giving some introduction about me. I'm VP Innovation Strategy at AI Core Spot. I have a couple of decades industry experience. Conversations we had 5 years ago about AI have completely changed from what we are happening and seeing on the ground today. The shift from experimentation to execution is real, it's accelerating. So before we dive in, thanks to my colleagues Arvind, Naveen, who are there, and these two guys have worked relentlessly behind the scenes to bring today's event webinar. Now, for those who are joining us for the first time, let me tell something about AI Core Spot. We founded 5 years ago with one mission: build a place where the brightest mind in tech could come together, learn together, grow together. So today, AI Core Spot has become that knowledge hub, a community trusted by professionals and enterprises globally. We do around 3 to 4 webinars every month, bringing you fresh themes, fresh perspectives, real insights from distinguished industry leaders, subject matter experts, and thanks to all our partners who have been with us in this journey today. Uh, our vision is to become world's leading AI-driven professional community, and with audiences like this, I'm genuinely believe we are well on our way. To talk about what's in store for you today, we are going deep on a lot of things. Actually, I'll give you some idea, maybe resetting expectations from hype to ROI, fixing the data readiness bottleneck, moving from proof of concept to production, governance, and there is a lot many things to discuss today. So I'll let the speakers do the talking. So, speaking about the real leaders and the speakers, let me introduce maybe the names of today who are going to be here with us, and they are with you in the screen. We have Laura, we have Sean, we have Jeremy, we have Joe, we have Prabhu, and moderating the panel discussion today is John from InfoVision. So one quick note before we begin, the views and insights shared by the speakers today represents their own personal perspectives and experiences and are not reflective of the organization which they represent. So with that, I'll hand it over to John. We have great set of speakers to begin this exciting panel. Over to you, John.
Perfect. Good morning and good evening, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from. Thank you so much, Nitin, and a very good morning to our esteemed panelists. We've got a great topic for our discussion today: beyond experimentation, scaling AI for measurable business outcomes. We have an extraordinary lineup of tech experts and fellow innovators from various industries, from retail, alternative medicine, from B2B retail, from distribution, financial services, healthcare, and banking, a wealth of knowledge and experience between Laura, Joe, Sean, Prabhu, and Jeremy, having led major product innovation, data, AI-led initiatives. I'm excited to hear from them just as much as the audience is, and we're going to get started off in a minute as we speak about everything from the technological advancement from Gen AI to reasoning AI, AGI, from mainframes to edge computing, what's happening from rule-based AI to real-time, decentralized, explainable systems. We'll speak about the shift from experimentation to ROI, data being the foundation, scaling AI systems and the challenges, KPIs that matter today, future trends, what's next for enterprise, AI, among other topics. We're going to be speaking about all of that in just a minute. Before we get started, just a housekeeping note for our audience. Please look at the Q&A chat box on your screen. If you think of a question for the panelists at any point, just type it in there and we'll get it worked in towards the end based on the time that we have left. Perfect. Let's dive right into it. There's so much happening in the AI space right now. I mean, just a few months back, Anthropic made headlines with the release of Claude Mythos preview. And from Anthropic's Claude Opus to Sonnet to Mythos to what hyperscalers overall are doing across AWS, Google, or Azure, where they're shifting to delivering agents and outcomes versus just tools. So, I mean, you have AWS Agent Core with massive context windows. And then you see enterprise platforms like Salesforce's Agentforce, you see GitHub's Copilot, you see deeper IDE integrations that they're speaking about. Google launched the Gemini Enterprise Agent platform. AWS expanded to Amazon Connect. There's so much happening that it's really hard to keep up with all the updates. So my first question is for all the speakers, cutting through all the hype, how are developments in artificial intelligence, machine learning, agentic AI, and other emerging technologies and platforms actually transforming businesses and industries today? What are some concrete real-world examples you're seeing within your own industry and with your clients? I'll start with Sean. As the Vice President, Information Technology at Good Day Farms, again, hired as a strategic leader to drive enterprise transformation, integrating AI-enabled models into IT operations and foster efficiency. What are you seeing in the real alternative medicine space?
So with AI, we're changing everything, right? We're just changing course. Right now, we are not just implementing AI, but we're also in that discovery phase too. Is where does it make sense within our business operations? Where can we're asking questions such as, does this make sense to implement AI, or do we get this a manual process? At that, it's a financial question, right? When does it make sense to do AI or move it to something else and keep it what it currently is? So within the traditional AI and even just machine learning, it's improving production, even the automation, right? We've always had automation there, but now we've got AI agents that can help us out with that automation. From there, we're can we learn about forecasts? Are we keeping our inventory just-in-time inventory? Are we optimizing those inventories? From a financial perspective, can we identify fraud? Can we detect security threats within our infrastructure? Can we, from a tech stack, within just networking equipment, can we predict those equipment failures before they're going to impact our operations? Where we currently operate right now, we have it, the highly regulated industries, we have it to where if we lose access to all of our cameras, we have to shut down our stores. We can't have that because obviously we lose a lot of revenue. So can we find out using AI before that impact is going to impact us from the business operations sides? From a generative AI, we've done some surveys here and there, and we found out we're increasing our employee productivity. If you look at it, you can see people's emails coming back at us, and it's very clear that they're using AI. How long did it take them to write that very well thought out email in AI? And they just basically review it, copy, make changes, paste it in an email and send it out, versus now I've got to go back and see, did I spell that right? Did I use Grammarly or not? Etc. But we're able to draft emails quicker. We can, I've been able to use it to analyze a contract quicker and then send it over to counsel, our general counsel, to review it and such. My teams have also used it to just generate code using Copilot, if we can, for any type of the automations again. The other thing there is that we got to make sure and understand that we're accelerating at our operations, and it's got to make sense. So we're not replacing employees. And I think that's a big communication that we've got to get out, is that we're not replacing our employees. We're accelerating at the operations. It's making us more efficient. So let's let the AI do those repetitive tasks. Of course, at the end of the day, we do need to have the human in the loop, so we got to make sure that it's there. But that is somewhat some of the things that we're working on here at Good Day Farm.
Well, thank you so much. I'd like to hear from Prabhu, and what are you seeing in the B2B retail distribution space, Prabhu?
Yeah, thanks, John. A lot of what Sean mentioned, Sean, you talked about inventory forecasting. I think there's a lot of parallels here. I think my perspective would be really focused on the customer experience side, John, right? The way I'm thinking about it. When I say customers, I'm talking about internal customers or associates and external customers who are out there buying things from us. You want to observe the first mile to last mile of the journey that your customers and associates are in. And when you look at the journey, there is so many opportunities that you're going to discover right in that journey. And where we are focused on is, as an example, the customers being onboarded. What can we do there? How are we fulfilling the customer? How are they searching their websites? Can I apply personalization to them? How can AI help in all of these scenarios? For the most part, it comes down to do not look at AI primarily with the Gen AI lens. You have to look at AI in a much more wider lens, right, in terms of capability. So it's a pretty exciting phase for, I would say, any company right now looking at AI. So we're excited to look at the whole journey of the customer.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu. Now, Laura, in the financial services space, what have you been seeing, and what are some of the interesting projects that your team has been working on?
Yeah, so we are quite a bit like Prabhu here. We are really focused on making sure that we use these technologies to really change the member experience. And the way that we've seen really good results is to go beyond the demo chatbot. I mean, we all have one. Nobody denies that. But when you start looking at your back office processes and find ways to make those back office processes more efficient so that people can spend more time on that member journey and understanding, what their needs are. I mean, that's really what we're focused on here. So a lot of our work has been to make our processes, our loan automation processes, our qualifications for membership more efficient. Really looking at those things that really don't connect with that member experience and getting those as efficient as possible so we can focus on the other things. So, for example, we have a bot that answers questions, escalated questions from our member service center. It answers something over like 50,000 questions since the beginning of the year. That frees up time for the harder questions. It frees up time for those member service center folks to really listen instead of, oh my gosh, I've got to think about this process. How am I going to open this IRA, for example? Let's give that to them, right? So those are the things we're doing here.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Laura. Would someone love to hear from Joe on what he is saying especially in the banking space?
Unmute myself so you could hear me. Thanks, John. Yeah, in the banking space here, we're not a traditional bank, right? We're a credit card issuing company. That's our primary source of business. And so, as you would imagine, the AI projects that are becoming front and center are on the call center, collections, things that directly impact our customers. And similar to what Laura said, the questions that a bot can answer, if it's, I don't know, levels 1, 2, and 3, I think a bot can handle them and they're able to process through. And the more difficult questions, even when somebody says, thank you, but I'd really like to speak to a representative, that's an immediate transfer. There is no, but tell me a little bit more about what you'd like to do, because we've all been on calls where it asks a zillion questions and you're getting a little impatient. So we've been able to transcend that. And that's the front and center part of the business for us. Similarly to what Laura said, the back end of the business. Gosh, there's so much opportunity here to be able to make it more efficient and streamline it. It's not front and center, and it won't be in the first phase or two, but there's at least discussions about which business cases should we be evaluating when the time comes to evaluate them? And I think the primary thing here is organizations typically invested in AI assuming outcomes were going to take place. That was the original assumption, much like we did for every other technology implementation. Today, that shift in thinking, we can no longer assume those. We need to be able to plan and think differently about projects. What specifically are we intended to deliver as an expected outcome? Specifically, have we had all the costs identified? And are we going to be in a position to monitor, detect, escalate, take an action, and use the human in the loop before the expected outcome drifts too far? So that's a front and center part for me personally, and why I chose to write about commercial control and how the world of evaluating ROIs and business cases is changing. And it's exactly one of the major reasons why, as you said earlier, AI projects are not scaling. They're not delivering expected outcomes because the assumption was that if we implement it, it'll happen. That can no longer be the case.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Joe. And we'll certainly speak all more in detail about commercial control and what you're doing over there. But I'd like to hear from Jeremy as well on what's happening and what your team is seeing, especially when it comes to the healthcare industry, Jeremy.
Absolutely. Joe, you said a lot of good things. Laura, same as Sean. We're all saying a lot of the same things in just our own industries, right? Where we've shifted, where our internal questions go, can AI do this? We're starting to ask, where can AI create measurable value, right? Where is the ROI in what we want to implement? And what is the most bang for execution to deliverable, right? So here at Mountain Physical Therapy Partners, we're looking at AI to improve patient engagement, right? Automate repetitive administrative tasks. So we're doing both external and internal. We're looking at strengthening our cybersecurity, right? Like you, Sean, and help our teams find, insights to our data much faster. So we're looking at ways to implement AI onto our data matrix as well. So where we've already seen great improvement is, patient engagement, right? That's the big thing, and also internal support. So even from your standard technical IT teams, we actually have our ticket queue hitting zeros now because of AI and automation now, right? Where before those ticket queues would sit in high numbers, and now with AI automation, it's going, almost instant support for end users internally. So we're doing internal and external there as well. One thing I want to give a takeaway on this thought is AI should not remove friction. No, let me rephrase that. AI should remove friction, not create it, right? And that's really how I'm focusing on AI. How do we remove our friction? And when I'm looking at the ROI process, that is one of my factors, right? Is what is that friction going to remove and allow, like you said, Laura, allow people to focus on higher impact value focus versus, mundane tasks.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. And we'll definitely touch on one of the important topics that you mentioned about with respect to data as well later in our conversation today, Jeremy. And a good segue to what you were speaking about measuring the outcomes as well. And the follow-on question to what all of you just shared about the use cases. And I'll start with Laura on this. In your role as the Senior Vice President, Technology Engineering at Global Credit Union, and having led major development, deployment, innovative technology architectures, integration, automation investment projects. So what's changed in how leaders like yourself evaluate AI investments, and how are organizations defining measurable impact? I mean, whether it's cost savings, revenue lift, productivity, risk reduction. So what has become a priority for you today, Laura?
I'll be honest, this is a tough area right now to really talk through. But what I think is pretty interesting is the bones of the conversation are the same. So those of us who have been in technology and automation and all of the cool emerging technologies that have come along know that you have to measure not just by usage, right? Usage is a vanity measure. It's a leading measure. It's not your actual output. So when you talk about that, these measurable business outcomes, you've got to measure with our old school business answers, right? So you're talking about capacity. You're talking about, actually delivering, value back to your members. So, for example, for us, the fact that you are able to get at your pending transactions and your pending balances without having to get to the member service center, to me, that's value. That's saving member time. It's also saving MSC time, but really to me, the biggest thing that I look for is those things that make my members' experience better and happier. So that's how I think about it.
Thank you, Laura. And Jeremy, would you like to add anything to it on how this has changed for you with respect to evaluating AI investments?
Absolutely, right. The the thing is, I want to start with this. Excitement isn't a KPI, right? A lot of us look at AI, even being tech geeks that we are, we get excited, right? Like, oh, we can do that, we can squirrel off. But the real value is, for me, is like hours saved, faster decision making, reducing operational costs, improving patient and employee experience, and reducing our operational risks, right? So in healthcare, we also look at whether AI helps us deliver better care without adding complexity. If we can't measure those outcomes, it's probably not the right use case. And that's where I'll leave that one.
Okay. Thank you, Jeremy. And yet, what a lot of the examples, a lot of the use cases, and what each of you has spoken about, those are incredibly valuable use cases, a lot of value that your teams are seeing today. And well, a lot of this is the area where teams are focusing on today. And based on conversations I've been having with other leaders in the industry as well, there's a common thread that runs across many of these successes, and especially for projects where they're struggling, is the underlying quality and readiness of the data. And I mean, you see this evident by industry leaders, some of the analyst firms, reports, the stats that they publish as well. That, I mean, where Gartner noted that almost 30% of AI, Gen AI projects get abandoned due to poor data quality governance. And another research said that 10% of organizations, only 10% of organizations feel completely ready for AI adoption, despite it being a strategic priority for more than 65% of them. My next question is related to this, data readiness, the real bottleneck. And I'll start with Jeremy on this as well. There's so much of data related to healthcare operations, again, clinical, financial, patient engagement data. All of this, again, your teams needs to ensure that it's all done in a HIPAA compliant environment, and you have data from EMR, EHR systems, and so much more. So how much of AI success is actually a data problem rather than a model problem? And what investments in data infrastructure, governance, quality, access are proving critical for your team today?
Absolutely. Those are great. A great call out here. AI success is primarily a data challenge, right? Organization often focus on selecting the right models, like you just mentioned, John. But if data isn't accurate, governed, or accessible, right, like a true data model should be, even the best models won't deliver meaningful results, right? So even here at Mountland, we're in a phase right now where we are remodeling our whole data structure to ensure that it's AI ready, right? So, putting in we're investing in building a trusted environment with central data that we can scale with AI. Um, what I would say is AI. We're not looking at AI to fix our data, right? Like a lot of organizations are probably looking like we have big data models. How do we put AI on top to stack it? We're taking the opposite approach. Let's go fix our data first and ensure it's in a proper, governed state that, users don't have roaming access or uncontrolled access before we stack AI on top, right? So we're in that process now. And, we're excited to see what the outcome is going to be once we actually start building our model on top of our data. So I'm sure this time next year, when we do another panel, that I'll be speaking a lot differently of this, maybe lessons learned, things we should have done differently. And like a lot of us, right, on this call, like we're all in the same rat race trying to figure out the same problems, right? But I'm highly confident in being able to execute this, right? Like putting in our MCP servers, putting in our semantic layers, and making sure we have all those pieces in play to be able to, stack on, Claude or any of these other AI models we want to use on it.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you, Jeremy. And Prabhu, in your role as senior director, on digital products engineering with MSc Industrial Supply, and especially as it pertains to B2B retail, the distribution industry. So would you like to add anything to what Jeremy just spoke about, related to data readiness and how important this is for your team?
Yeah, no. I would say any business right now, no matter which industry you're in, right, data is going to have to play a huge role. One thing that I've been trying to reframe, John, is there's a new tendency these days to talk about AI first, right? And I'm trying to challenge that to say you still want to think business first, right? It's your what, your why hasn't changed, right? You want to keep asking those questions. The how will change. Jeremy, you talked about it. Today you have something, a year from now you have a lot more access to various different things. But still, the fundamental layer, I think, is still starts with data. And data quantity and quality both are important for you, right? It's not just they're not exclusive. So you really want to think about from data perspective. I'll give an example, right, just to make the point. Sometimes we look at data from a vertical perspective, right? Is my product data ready? Is my customer data ready? Is my transaction speaking the same language? Right? And you start looking at this, tying it back to my customer experience journey concept. Let's say you're searching for a drill bit, right? As a customer. Now, you can buy a drill bit from anywhere, Amazon, Walmart, you name it, right? It's a very common commodity item that you can buy. But where are you differentiating, right? So when you come to us, we'll often think about who are you? What type of material are you drilling? Are you drilling titanium or are you drilling aluminum? Now that's differentiation for you because if you put the wrong drill bit, you could cause a fire hazard in a place, right? So that level of accuracy becomes super important. So the way I look at it is the higher the accuracy you have, right, the more care you need to do from a data perspective. And now you're not just looking at one data. We talked about silos for a long time, but that still exists to some extent. It's the people that's going to have to build. You talked about semantic, Jeremy, right? That kind of understanding is required across your customer journey, not specific to one area. And the other one that we're also experimenting is you don't have to assume that LLM is always your answer, right? What I'm starting to do in my team is we're also looking at SLM as well, because some areas where SLM can give you a lot more value because you have a certain set of proprietary data that's not available outside, and you want to capitalize that. You want to experiment. You want to do A/B testing to eventually see which one is a winner. So to me, it is data, it is model. I think the role will keep changing eventually, but if you were to ask me to pick one, I would go with data.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Prabhu. And you mentioned about the SLMs as well, and we'll certainly discuss about that later in the conversation as it pertains to cost and tokenization and everything that's happening in that space and what companies are doing to keep the compute costs lower while deriving actual value out of this. We spoke about some of the use cases across industries, and we heard perspectives from all the panelists from support services, customer interactions, member care, chatbots, customer journey optimization. We spoke about product discovery, back office functions, contact centers, inventory, operations optimization, transcriptions, and many other. And there's so much that's happening in the agentic SDLC, the ADLC space. There's so much happening in hyper personalization, back office automation, AI ops, and many other areas as well. I'd like to switch gears a bit here and focus our discussion on some of the challenges with respect to scaling. And the reason I'd like to do that is I mean, while everyone's speaking about initiatives happening and the with AI-led projects, IDC research states that 88% of AI pilots have failed to reach production. And there was another MIT report that stated that 95% of Gen AI pilots have delivered little to no measurable business impact. So my question is about scaling from POCs to production. And I'll start with Joe on this. And Joe, I'd certainly like you to spend a little time on what you were discussing about earlier as well, about commercial controls, right? So from your role as vice president at Credit One Bank, where you're focused on ensuring that AI delivers the outcomes organizations expect today, not just when it comes to execution. What are the biggest barriers that you feel are present in moving from proof of concept to production? What does a mature AI tech stack look like today? And after I hear from Joe, I'd certainly like to hear from the other panelists as well on this specific question. Yeah, please go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, thank you, John. Yeah, I mean, I think if what we look back on, or when I look back on things, right, the need for speed got in the way of everything, right? Everybody wants to do AI something, right? Board levels are talking to board levels. What are we doing? We can't wait. We have to do things. And so while we understand the need for speed, it's got completely in the way of everything. And so what happens is software providers are selling what buyers are buying, intake and orchestration. The whole world was about intake and orchestration to set up a project. And so when I look at this and I started to think about, well, why are the statistics so bad about scaling and delivering expected outcomes? I came up with a couple of things. The basic blocking and tackling that we've learned and that I've learned as a management consultant and somebody that's implemented systems is change management. The second, of course, is the data normalization that we just spoke about. And then making sure that the workflows for the business case are completely optimized. And so that you're starting on a very firm foundation and you're building up. Now that gets in the way of speed because there's time to do this. And I think businesses are now understanding that I can't assume the outcome. I have to be able to plan for it in a much different way. And what does that mean when we say plan for it in a different way? Well, I know we talked about efficiencies and we talked about a number of different things that projects deliver. The question in my mind is, what do we do with the efficiency? How do we articulate that I've just saved hours, and how does that equate to the ROI and to the business case? Have I reallocated resources to do something else? Or did I just mysteriously gain 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 hours? What did I do with that? And so to avoid sitting in the CFO hot seat, which I've sadly been in a few times, the business case has to change. And we have to fully define what the expected outcome is. I mean, specifically, right? We expect to save $1 million. Okay, well, how are we going to determine that $1 million is saved? Not simply by a report that magically appears 12 or 18 months from now and I see that I did or didn't achieve it. So when I talk about commercial control and what I believe the future stack is going to look like, it's going to be a system of record. It's going to be intake. It's going to be a decision intelligence layer which takes what that intake is and says, which tools or which outside pieces of data do I need to make sure that this gets orchestrated correctly? And then above that, I have a supervisory agent level, where this level looks at everything that's happening underneath it and making sure that it's happening exactly as it should, preventing drift and making sure that the transactions, that the demand itself that drives the transaction and the workflow hasn't shifted. And then it communicates to the commercial control level at the top, which is when we define what the expected outcome is. We know where to look to see if token usage is exploding through the roof and it's completely killing my ROI. And we know that if the demand is shifted inside the organization, it's sensing the drift of the expected outcome and it's alerting the human in the loop, not only that it's happening, but about why it's happening and what we should do to correct it immediately before the expected outcome drifts even further. So that's how I see the stack evolving going forward, and with a complete shift in how the definition of the business case and the ROI is articulated, and agents are empowered to watch it and report against it.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Joe. And thank you for spending time on speaking about those terms and commercial control and how your team is focusing on that as well. And I'd so like to hear from the other panelists, and Sean, Prabhu, Laura, Jeremy, anything that you'd like to add to it when it comes to scaling from POCs to actual production.
Yeah, I've got one. I think we
ahead,
all
Laura.
have something to say. Yeah, I was going to say, I think, Joe, you're absolutely right on this. The whole, idea that we've been pretending like it's the Wild West, right? We're all going out and trying to do a whole bunch of things. And then you find out that you actually needed those guidelines and guardrails to keep you in check. I really do believe that a well-regulated organization can outrun go fast technology stack. And the reason is because you can build in all of those controls at the beginning, and then you have pre-negotiated trust. And once you have pre-negotiated trust within your pilot, then moving it into production, you have a better understanding of some of those things, right? So I'm, absolutely, I think that's great. I think that's where the tech stack is going. I love the idea of the decision layer and then the orchestration layer, and talking about it in that way makes a lot of sense. And yeah, that's what I'd say about that.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna, I definitely agree on those aspects, right? Change management, the governance side of it. The other part for me that's really big on, and I'm big on it, is the security and the compliance. So AI is already out there, right? Shadow AI is something that we hate as leaders to hear about. And not just to hear about, but then to discover it in our network, right? From a security point of view, we've got to protect that sensitive information, PII, even the IP portion of it. We've got to make those requirements. In my industry that I'm in, there's a lot of regulatory things that are going on, as I mentioned before. If we're not meeting those, and the AI systems, or even the agents that are exposing confidential data, that's a pretty big concern for us. In all the industries that I've been listening to you guys too, it's going to be an even bigger one. Right now, cannabis is not HIPAA. We don't have to follow HIPAA, but we do follow a lot of the HIPAA guidelines, right? We're just not being held to it, which is great for us, but at the same time, it's still a risk, and we have to make sure that we're protecting our customer data, we're protecting everything there as far as the elements that they have, and what's going on, what they're being prescribed for, and such. And that's just on the customer side of things. You mentioned the change management, Joseph, and with that, for me, on the change management, it's been internal discussions that I've had with other leaders in different departments within my company, is that we need to invest in training. I think you mentioned something about with the prompts and who's who's using them. If we're saying, okay, here's the AI that you can use, but you're not utilizing it correctly, we just paid a lot of money for you just to ask a question that wasn't really needed. Or we're just getting general information back. We're like, well, give me more information. Give me more information, right? For example, there's, we've been kind of going through on some pilots about IVRs, so the interactive voice recognition, and that's an AI also. If we're getting charged by the minute for a customer to call into our phones and ask these questions, we've got to put something in there that says to the AI, hey, that's not what you're here to call for. So if somebody's saying, hey, how's the day going today? What color is the sky? We've got to cut that caller off so that we're not getting charged, right? There's got to be part of that built into the AI to where we are learning it. And then, of course, like I've said, for the training. One more thing I'll talk on really quick is, the governance. And it's going to be a big thing in my opinion. We have a published AI policy. We do. Is it being followed? Kind of. I mean, tell me you got kids, without telling me you got kids. It's one of those things that, like, we've got to continue to update it. We've got to know who owns these models, who's owning, what area of AI, and then of course who's validating the outputs, right? We're going to talk about that quite a bit, or we have been talking about it as far as the human in the loop. Without that governance, the AI adoption, it's not going to scale for us. We've got to have that governance. And again, that starts at the beginning.
Thank you, Sean. And we'll definitely speak about the cost, the model routing, all of what you were mentioning about as well. So how different companies can ensure that their overall compute costs are kept lower as well. And you did bring up an important topic about the governance, the risk, the compliance, the policies. We'll certainly spend time on that as well in detail, Sean. I'd like to see if Prabhu, if you had any other inputs that you want to add as well.
I think, like Joe, Laura, Sean, you all touched upon everything important. I'm sure there's a common feedback and theme there. One of the things I look at is operational plumbing, right? That's still important. Because when people look at AI, unfortunately, they still look at Gen AI as a huge thing, and I keep reframing that, right? Do you have access to your ERPs, your PIMs, your CRM? Is there access via API? Is there security in there? So all those foundational things are still important. How are you getting pricing? What's your inventory? End of the day, all those things I just talked about are some things we traditionally monitor if you're running a business, right? These are business outcomes you always do. Nothing's changed from that perspective. I think the how is changing a little bit. One aspect for me is treat AI more as a product and not a project. Because oftentimes people run into a project methodology where there's a defined start and end. There is no defined start and end. This is a product that needs to continue. Whether you have a physical product, a digital product, or a service product, you have to keep product thinking in mind. And I think, Joe, you talked about speed, right? That is coming up a lot, right? Need for speed is huge. But one thing that I would recommend people to look at is, while speed is important, understand the difference between speed and velocity. Velocity is speed with direction in it. If you run into AI projects, you're going to find tons of things on the internet, tons of products. They're going to get you in all different directions. You will have speed, but are you going the right direction from a business strategy perspective, where you want to go? So I think that is super important, is to refocus the energy on speed versus velocity. Also have some early warning systems in place. You can leverage AI for that as well, right? Have early warning systems to understand the drift that, Joe, you talked about, right? Are we drifting? I think that's a critical question as well that you want to think about. If you have good answers for all those things, John, I think you will have a scalable AI system.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Prabhu, and great insights from all the panelists as well. And this also takes us to an important topic for the discussion, right? So you spoke about the guardrails and everything else while scaling a lot of these enterprise systems, and I mean this is in line with what a lot of the industry stats, industry research speaks about as well. That a lot of companies are, organizations today are actually pressured to deploy AI despite security governance concerns. And I mean, there's industry studies that says that, I mean, the disclosed material and AI risks in 2020 filings have been going up substantially for a lot of organizations, whether it's reputational, regulatory, compliance risks leading to all of this. And then I'll turn this question over to you, Jeremy. I mean, I would like to hear your inputs on this, and I'm sure this is top of mind for you as the head of cybersecurity and technology. What security capabilities should organizations be prioritizing over the next 24 months to defend against autonomous AI agents, the identity controls, behavioral analytics, data governance, continuous monitoring, especially with so many risks that are involved. But it's on the usage of AI, which could be the bias, the hallucination, again, IP leakage, compliance, all of this, right? So what is your team focused on today to mitigate a lot of these concerns?
That's the loaded question behind all this AI, right? And it's not just AI, it's been the history of technology. How do we do this securely and simple and scalable, right? And really, how I'm looking at this is how do we use AI safely and responsibly, right? And you mentioned a few of those things that a lot of companies are focusing on now, a lot like usual after the fact, right? Like identifying access management, governance policies, how to implement the governance policy. I mean, a policy is only as good as technology can implement it and hold it accountable to those measures, right? I mean, like a lot of those things, John, you just mentioned are user errors or user inflicted wounds, right? People taking code with an API token in it, put it into Claude or ChatGPT, pasting it in there, and next thing you know, the Department of Defense of the United States of America is breach, right, or potential breach, and so on, right? Like even the highest ranking government officials are, causing weaknesses in systems. So that brings me down to this: like, how do you keep it simple, right? How do you add AI reviews and software approval processes, including vendor risk assessments or even internal looking? Like, how do you ensure the governance policies are in place, where employees aren't able to copy and paste, right? Like, knowing what tools are available to help you lock those down or having the necessary skills internally to be able to implement those guardrails is essential, right? And making sure that, how to word this, the governance policy is fully implemented and bought in by all management around you, right? If you put so much governance policies in place, people are going to bypass that, right? They're going to bring a personal laptop to work. They're going to start bypassing you to make sure they can stay in the running with the best of the best and showing the value of work. Well, second thought of that is I don't care what damage it causes to a company as a result of it, right? They're literally trying to add a name for themselves, like I said earlier, a rat race that we're all in, right? So what I'm going to say here is the biggest AI risk isn't technology, it's people that use it, right? It's always been the case and it continues to be the case, and now it's bigger than ever, right? Now, people are willingly giving open AIs and open platforms IP. But, Sean's talking about IP. Like, I can only imagine, your employees taking, IP and pasting it in, right? Joe, same thing with you, like taking how you do business processes and throwing it out into the west, like Wild West that people are talking about. Like, it literally feels like that. So there's things that we can do that are literally 101 that we've always had access to do. Blocking access to people to go on certain web pages, like locking down endpoints so they can't do things, like really forcing it in, right? Whitelisting devices into your networks, right? Like if it's your GitHub's repositories, your GitLab repositories, or your Git Guardians, making sure that your security teams are taking the extra mile to implement the security protocols to only allow devices that are in your domain access to your information, right? So BYOD no longer is an issue because you just don't allow it to happen. Like going to the basis and locking things down is where this really is the way to lock it out, right? If an end user is saying, "Hey, I went and got my own chat GPT and I brought in my own CRM because I don't like the company's KPIs," whatever the use case is, right? Those are all risks, right? That's like Sean, you're saying you have to start using some HIPAA guidelines, right? But you know you have PHI, PCI, and all these other regulations that come down, right? And the same with Laura, Joe, you guys all have big PCI issues you have to deal with, right? And compliance and big banking, fintech stuff that you guys have to comply with. And it really comes down to security teams locking those devices down, making sure that your networks are, honed in to whitelist only company devices, and literally blocking people that shouldn't be AI off of it, right? And setting those very basic guide rails in place. Like I use basic because it is, right? Like you don't have to think huge and broad. You start simple, right? Like, how do I stop my user from doing this today? And it is literally simple little steps that will take you to where you need to be.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeremy. I mean, and we can all agree, while there's so much of an urgency to work on AI-based systems and bring in efficiencies, the governance, risk controls, the guardrails that need to be in place while accessing especially the data, they become foundational, especially as all these organizations are racing to deploy technologies responsibly. Per recent McKinsey study, it stated that more than 88% of organizations now use AI in at least one business function, but only about a third of them are truly scaling. I'd like to shift our focus to measuring success, the KPIs that actually matter. We touched on this during the start of our conversation, but I'd like to spend more time on this and what are the KPIs that we are setting today for our organizations? And I'd like to start with Prabhu on this. In your role as a digital product leader, and you have E2E ownership across the e-commerce products, the tech stacks, you're guiding engineering, architecture, product management, your design, your analytics teams as well. And so when it comes to metrics that leaders are using today to track AI success beyond experimentation, how is value attributed to AI versus the broader digital initiatives? And are we seeing standardized benchmarks emerge across industries? I'd like to hear from Laura as well after Prabhu, you share your thoughts on this.
Yeah, no,
Please
happy to. Happy to. I think you're seeing the theme already from me, John, right? I'm more about your KPIs from a business perspective hasn't changed a lot, right? So you still want to keep very close eye on that. Like for me, revenue, conversion rate, retention rate, cost to serve, customer satisfaction scores, NPS, CSAT, they're not moving away because of AI. I think AI is going to help there, right? So ultimately, from a business perspective, I think those KPIs are still your shining light that you want to focus on. Ultimately, the question is, are you making your customers happy? Right? If you are, and when I say customers, could be anybody, internal customers, external customers, right? You name it. That's your biggest metric. When it comes to some of the AI pieces, one thing that I've seen is adoption metrics, right? That's come up a lot, especially Laura, you mentioned about internal productivity. Sean, you mentioned that as well, right? So adoption metrics is super important, but adoption does not mean measuring by amount of tokens you use. Clearly, I don't mean by that, right? It's really going back to the fundamental questions of what value are you using that for. Response quality, right? For us, that's super important as well, right? Is there accuracy involved in some of those things? So those are some of the specific measurements that I have taken in my area. Now, because we apply a lot of algorithms as well internally, we constantly go through A/B testing all the time, right? In terms of how customers respond to things. So you want to understand the experimentation metrics as well, right? Because what happens is integrate disappointment into your process because you will be disappointed at some point in time, right? But you have to integrate that into your process. And what I've found is using A/B testing or ABC testing in some cases is a huge metric that you want to keep an eye on and then scale when appropriate. So that's roundabout way of me measuring is really don't forget your business KPIs, still important, and move into specific areas on AI because each one of us might be measuring different things from our own world.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Laura?
Laura, please.
Okay. I totally agree. The fundamentals haven't changed, and I think you're hearing that from everybody on this panel one way or another. Like, we need to make sure that we cyber secure 101, right? We need to make sure that we are focused on business outcomes. Yes, the technology has changed, but that doesn't mean the game has really changed. The rules haven't changed. We just changed our shoes or our helmets or something like that, right? I would say the one thing that I like to measure too is kind of like probably you said, bake disappointment into the process, or I like to ensure that what we're not doing is just passing things up. So somebody does an experiment, they love it, and all of a sudden it moves up. I like a success metric less than one, so that that we're taking a look at these things really seriously. That's a process metric. It's not really a leading metric. It's kind of like an in-between metric, but it's one that really, I think is going to be important in the long term, that people are experimenting, but we're also taking some chances and we're failing a little bit. So that's all I'd say about that.
Okay. Thank you, Laura. And those are powerful examples, real KPIs that your teams are focused on today, and that can turn AI from a promising experiment into actually being a genuine value driver. While we're speaking about everything that's happening across industries, one of the challenges that leaders are also facing right now is keeping the actual value from AI being eroded by rapidly escalating costs. And we've seen, we touched on this at the start of our conversation as well. When it comes to compute costs, and I know we spoke about SLMs and some of that as well, right? So, but AI compute costs have now surpassed human labor costs for a lot of teams. And we heard this from NVIDIA executives that have openly stated that compute is far more expensive than having people take care of some of those projects. And we heard from Uber CTO stating that they've exhausted their company's entire 26 AI budgets early in the year. And again, this is primarily just due to high token costs. From tools like Cloud Code. And we hear about some companies that are spending over 113,000 per month, and these are small teams, just 4-member teams. So we are seeing all of this happen. So when it comes to cost management and infrastructure strategy, and then I'd like to start with you on this, Laura, and then certainly hear from Prabhu as well. How are organizations managing the rising costs of compute and models? Also touch on the role of open source versus proprietary models when it comes to cost control.
So this is a tough area as well right now. It's changing every day, like token costs, all of these things. The equation of when to move to a different piece, or to actually bring in hardware, all of that is changing at the same time. I think it goes back to the very basics of it, talking about cost control, and thinking about every decision that you make in that way is really helpful. I also think we get so wrapped up in like tooling, and trying to look at that new tool and see if that's the one for us, and we're forgetting those basics too. Even when you're using, like, if you have M365 Copilot versus some of the other ones, you can look at it and say, okay, well, is this a decision that really can be made, and maybe even better, by a lower cost model? Right now, we don't have that understanding. And so what happens is everybody just goes after the biggest model they can. So we're all going to have to mature about how we do things, how we think, how we orchestrate these types of capabilities to make it work. So I think a lot of our work right now is just to put those foundational levels in, that education to everybody, to make sure that that is how we're thinking about it. And then really doing that calculation of, okay, well, should we go to an SLM on this? Should we, is this protected data? Is this something that I want to keep and I don't especially want to send out there into the ether and give to everybody? Making sure that we're making those decisions at the beginning instead of, whoops, right? Nobody wants that. So it's tough, but we're going to have to evolve pretty darn quickly.
Perfect. Thank you, Laura. And Prabhu, I'd like to hear your thoughts as well on how your team is managing the rising cost when it comes to compute and the models especially.
No, I totally agree with what Laura talked about. I know it's an evolving piece, but the way I think about this is, for any organization, there's people, process, technology, right? All of them have a cost element attached to it, right? And then when you look at it from that perspective, it's about changing conversations. And our approach to go into AI areas is typically experimental first, right? So it's about changing conversations at some point. You start with, can I build it, is a question, right? And you change the conversation to, can we run this economically at scale? Right. Now, as soon as you bring the second question in, there's lots of ideas that comes in. But to Laura's point earlier, what I've often noticed, and I don't know, Laura, if you agree with this or not, it comes back to fundamental things like caching, latency, right model for the right job, SLM models, domain specific. All these things that we've been historically, grooming ourselves to be are still valid when we think about the strategy. And again, not everything needs to be Gen AI, John, as well, right? So when I look at this, I did say people, process, technology. For every company, it's different. What is your talent level of your people, right? Like, I'm lucky to have some very strong engineers who still believe in traditional AI, machine learning, collaborative model algorithms, predictive models. They all still hold a lot of value. And that doesn't mean I've also seen sometimes not every application needs to be running in AI mode. There's some things are probabilistic, some are deterministic, some are decision tree. So you still go back to build versus buy. AI versus not AI is probably the new thing that's going to come up. But ultimately, are you adding business value? And is there a reliability component to it? So that's how I think about this. So another way of thinking about it, it's all of that, John, right? For you to come down to say cost management is not a simple thing. It is a process. There is lots of things that we need to go to get to the right one. And that can change in Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, financial year. All those things is still so dynamic right now. Laura, would you agree? I mean, that's what I'm seeing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you're totally spot on. It is a pretty wild time. How fun is it that we're all in this? Like,
That is true. That is true.
Yeah, we made it into, that future that we all talked about, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
John, I have one comment if I can add
please,
to it.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So from my perspective, because I'm in procurement and cost is everything about what I do, and the conversations with the CFO are quite different, right? So the thing that you don't want to hear is, why the heck are we doing this? And that's what the CFO would ask, because costs are completely out of control. And so how do we mitigate those? Well, the providers of tokens moving from a seat-based to a consumption-based model, there's no leverage unless you're buying multi millions of tokens, in which case that budget is astronomical to begin with. So to contain cost is a critical component to how things need to be thought about as we evolve into these projects. And I especially agreed with what, and I'm drawing a blank now because I don't see his name, but the previous speaker about the people, process, and technology. I look at it in a slightly different way. I look at it as a process, technology, and people. I look at it from that perspective. Is the process optimized? Is the business case clear? Critical step one. Step two, what's the right technology? Might not be AI, to the point. And then thirdly, do I have the right people interacting and managing the process in the environment that it's in? So those questions become front and center. And the question that becomes top of mind at the CFO level today is, I'm not sure we should be doing this, because if I can't scale, and that's what the statistics are showing us, it is exactly that. The costs are way over budget, and therefore can I continue to do this? And then the POCs, and there's millions of them, just crash and burn. So wanted to add that just as some context.
Thank you, Joe. And while we're all speaking about right KPIs, the checks and balances, all of it that can certainly deliver a strong ROI for the actual use cases. Many organizations are also today seeing these gains being further diluted by AI sprawl, right? So according to, Gartner, in fact, they were mentioning that the average Fortune 500 company is on track to manage over 150,000 AI agents by 2028. And this was just fewer than maybe 15 just a few years ago. And all of this comes with an explosion in complexity, the technical debt, the compute, the token usage, compliance risks, management complexity, all that. And I'd like to get inputs and thoughts from Jeremy and Sean on this. How can AI and automation allow lean teams to support this rapidly growing organizations, right? And while preventing AI sprawl across the enterprise?
That's a great call out here, because I have a lean team, right? Like, we live and breathe lean, right? And as we continue to implement more and more technology, in the previous discussion here, like, what I keep saying to myself, like a little bit off of your being lean here, I ask myself and I ask other operational departments, what's wrong with old school here? What's wrong with just typical automation, right?
Mm-hmm.
That question really helps narrowing down AI sprawl, right? Because if we can just automate a simple task using old school OCR and just implement something simple, right, it eliminates cost, because OCR is free, right? And automation is, time, right? And engineering just to take time, built in costs. So that's one way I take an approach of tending away from sprawl. So like when I go into board meetings, it's like, well, you need more AI. Well, where? Why? You know what I mean? Like, explain more. Like, and like it was mentioned earlier as well, is boards are talking to boards and they're getting more information from other, boards, and it's trending. Like, AI is a cool word, right? But the reality of the situation is, why? AI is cool, but it's expensive, right? Like, we just know Amazon laid off 30,000 employees just to bring back 11,000 because their own AI is too expensive for them to run, right? Like, let's make it make sense here. So as we talk about AI sprawl and cost and all that stuff, for us, we have limited resources, right? So AI, we allow, a small lean team to start, help automate with AI, but we really try to tend to go more traditional tools, right? That might be subsetted with AI a little bit, right? An example of that would be, we have a program called MSKUS, right? Where we're training our doctors to start doing EMG ultrasounding, right? So part of that is kind of like, well, we have a mentee and a mentor program, right? So we take the mentee's report, we augment it, we have OCR then convert all their images into a single PDF, and then we bring in a little bit of AI then to look at the report, make sure that it's accurate to the images, and then the mentor then can review it quickly, right? Where before that, it'd take like 50 minutes for a minimum of a mentor to go look at all those images versus the report and then compare it to it. Then we look at the opposite side. Now we take that from 50 minutes to 5 minutes, right? And then it cost me 15 cents like to run those tokens in that model. Like, that's a no-brainer. Like, I can pay a doctor, $85 an hour, or I can pay 15 cents and offset it. Like, the ROI is there. Does that make sense? So as far as like you start talking about sprawl and that kind of thing, like there's ways to take your proof of concepts, your PLCs, and then slowly look at what those are going to be. And then, if the models are too expensive again, like you can say, sorry, the proof of concept's too big. It's too expensive. It's going to cost, there's no ROI, right? And you don't lose hundreds of thousands of dollars by taking, the small implementations of proof of concepts and say, okay, let's start with just a PLC, right? That cost me $600, not $600,000, right? Like, it goes to the terminology, right? Fail fast, learn faster, right? Like, it's the mentality that, I'm taking my own team through, right? Like, how are we going to do this, and how are we going to learn, fail very fast, and learn even faster from those things, right? What I don't want is our organization to learn from AI sprawl that it costs too much money in implementation and the cost, and then it failed to implement, right? I mean, I got HR saying, I want more AI tools. I got operations saying, I want more AI tools. I got finance saying, hey, I want more AI tools. I have all these departments coming in my office and saying, hey, I need more. And we're like, explain more. Like, and then it really comes down to, you don't really need it. You need automation, right? You need just old school, like, better business processes, right? And you can, reuse staff, focus on higher return performance from your staff, higher key items that they can focus on. So our approach, my approach, has been really just standardizing the approval platforms, right? Making sure that everything comes to my desk before anyone goes instant contract with some third party that's created something fancy with OpenAI that they just use, some API token to create, and now they're trying to earn a buck off of it. When honestly, we can do that internally ourselves, right? And it's probably more safer that we do it ourselves because we know our own governances. We know, what our servers are doing and not doing, and training our models, and what skills are stuck inside of our models, right? Like, we know that, versus we don't know if they're taking our information and cross training to other platforms and other companies, right? So that's, avoid that sprawl, right? Like, I don't want 50 AI tools in our environment. I don't. Like, I already went from 200 IT vendors, technology vendors in our environment down to 54 in the last year and a half I've been at Mountain. I really want that 54 to be more like 20, right? Like, let's not keep adding complexity to the environment. I run myself on 3 S's: simple, scalable, and secure. If you don't have those basic 3 things, those 3 S's, you're never going to, let me rephrase that. Companies will struggle with technology always. And that's where I'm at with it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Jeremy. And Sean, would you like to add to what Jeremy just spoke about?
Yeah, I go back to it may sound a little lame here, but I go to third grade when you're learning about recycling, and there was that song that was recycle, reduce, reuse. I think it needs to be the same thing with AI, and really aspect of our business operations, right? If by part of that, the recycle, reduce, and reuse, I would say let's standardize these things, right? And some of the discoveries of within our own organization of who's using what as far as an AI platform, we had so many people that were saying, yes, I've used ChatGPT, yes, I've used Claude, I've used Vibe, I've used XYZ, et cetera, et cetera. And in that, of course, they're using or expensing it on their own personal account. Now, if we can standardize, hey, for everybody that's doing just general questions, I need help drafting an email, or I just need to know something simple about this product or inventory and such, let's use Microsoft Copilot, something simple. And it doesn't have to be a Copilot, but it's something simple that's just standardized for these types of issues of what you need to use AI for. Let's standardize that. For our colleagues over in the tech department, the application developers, they're going to need Claude most likely. Claude Developer would be a good one, right? Let's standardize that tool. Now, I've just introduced 2 different tools, but at least we now have a standardization, maybe by department, maybe, marketing to help create images and such can use either or something completely different. But I think if we have that standardization and we have that policy of the governance side of, hey, if you or someone on your team needs to use AI, here's the process on how to go about it. Here's how you can request the access for it. It is then going into our MCP server so that we can govern that portion. We can see and know what's going on, right? And then, of course, having that ability to reuse the AI services. I think that's very important, especially when it comes to code application development. I came a long time ago from where I would set static main, I don't even remember the command anymore, but, you're doing everything manual, but you can now reuse a lot of that stuff to where we can just, again, that's the recycle portion, right? Or the reuse. I mentioned the governance. We should be able to answer, to some of the things. Who has the access to this AI tool? Who owns it? What's going on there? And if that owner moves on or they get promoted or transferred, we should have that succession plan that's there. How is it then monitored? Is that an IT function? Is that the owner function? Where does it belong? And then, of course, I think one of the most important things that's important for us as business leaders and just in the industries is that who's going to answer what problem is this solving within our organization? I think that's a big one, and especially when it comes to just measuring that success. So for me, as some of the things that I'm working on to kind of reduce the AI sprawl, is we've got to govern it, obviously, but having that process there too. Where do we go? Who needs to be contacted? Who owns it? All those things, right? And then, of course, the automations. Personally, for me, in retail, I think Prabhu, you're in retail also, but really anywhere, right? There can be a lot of turnover. So for an IAM analyst to go in and start manual tasks, why can't we use an AI agent? Let's measure that outcome. Let's check on it every now and then. Let's not just automate it, but let's use an AI agent to go out to these systems and either disable or give access to these systems. For me, it become a better, faster onboarding and even offboarding if needed. We do have a lot of transfers or even promotions, so that would be another part too, where I would use that AI agent, not just in the automation portion of it, but we might even have an AI agent that then uses the automations. I don't know, but that's for me is what we would have to really look at is, how can we get our AI strategy disciplined?
Okay. Thank you, Sean and Jeremy, for sharing your inputs. And then definitely, like you mentioned, as we look ahead, a lot of the companies that are successfully managing sprawl today are definitely going to be the ones that are best positioned to pull ahead. And while we're on the topic, as over the next 2 to 3 years, there's going to be a clear divide between leaders, the high performers, and laggards, and the gap is expected to widen significantly. And my question is for Joe, Laura, and Prabhu. When it comes to the road ahead, when it comes to what's next with respect to enterprise AI adoption, what do you believe would differentiate AI leaders from laggards over the next 2 to 3 years?
All right, I'll start, and Laura can clean up what I leave, because I'm sure you can't cover everything on this, right? So the biggest differentiator is not going to be AI itself over the next couple of years. It's going to be how we utilize it, and I think everybody has spoken to that. The idea of process technology. AI doesn't have to solve everything, even though someone in the C-suite thinks that might. Difficult conversation to push back on it, but I think it's necessary to do that. And I think that technology is really going to become democratized, right? Execution discipline is not. We have to execute, right? We have to deliver expected outcomes, and those expected outcomes have to fit within a reasonable economic model. And the challenge for all of us is to put it into that model. And these are maybe smaller POCs. As much as I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of 1,000,000 POCs, but having said that, to be able to look at a model that is completely differentiated in terms of its definition, how the expected outcomes are going to be managed, how the agents are going to be utilized to monitor, escalate, detect, and alert is going to be critical to this. And if that scales, if that POC is successful, it's going to be an easier scale model to actually go ahead and put forward, right? So I think there's going to be a number of different changes to this. And I think the companies that pull ahead won't necessarily have the smartest AI model. It'll be ones that pull together these incredibly difficult definitions to be able to make this process scale.
Yeah.
Thank you, too. Laura?
Yeah, on top of that, I think the biggest thing is that leaders don't chase technology. We chase outcomes. So
100%.
when we talk about these things, leaders are going to do their best to stay out of the CFO hot seat. That's super important. But we've also got to be able to prove our worth. And the only way that you do that is by those outcomes. So when we talk about, the separation, it's the group of us who are going to find a way to make that happen, not the person with the coolest tool, right? Or the most awesome model with a zillion different attributes. That is all awesome, but if it's too expensive to run, if it doesn't really get you the results you want, it's not accurate enough, then it's not worth anything. So, I think it's up to us as leaders to keep our eyes on the prize, to talk about these business outcomes and use the wonderful and amazing tools that we have now to, just really drive that business outcome for our businesses.
Thank you, Laura. Prabhu, would you like to add anything to what Laura and George just mentioned?
Yeah, I would say if you remember back in the days, we used to talk about ideas don't matter, execution matters. And I think it's so relevant today, right? The best differentiator for you in your industry is execution. Access to models is not a differentiator anymore. You can get it anywhere, right? So that's what I would end with. That is execution, execution, execution.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhu. Well said. And we just have time for one more question. And this I believe is going to be good input for everyone who's joining us, especially someone who's starting off in the technology space, and especially with so much that's changing in this space. And when we've heard different views over the years about the job market, but at the same time, for LinkedIn economic graph, and it says that the jobs requiring AI literacy skills have grown over 70% year over year. This includes entry-level jobs as well. And you also see there's a notable tone change in 2026, especially from many of the prominent AI tech executives who issued stark warnings about white-collar jobs and the changes previously. They've publicly walked back, or they've softened those predictions. And some of them, like Sam Altman even mentioning that he's glad that he was wrong about the job market, and you see the tone changes towards emphasizing resilience, job transformation, augmentation, your opportunities. Some of them even speaking about potential labor shortages when it comes to some of the areas because of the demand that's going to be there as well. And we're also seeing different roles evolve, right? So whether it's agentic AI engineers, we are seeing agent architects, platform engineers, context engineers, MLOps engineers, solution architects, all of it driven by the investment that's happening in the space by companies as well. So my question is for Jeremy and Sean. As a leader in the tech space, any parting words of wisdom to individuals who are starting their careers in tech space and they want to thrive in this ever-changing landscape?
Yeah, I'll take that. So technology changes constantly, right? And more, it's getting more and more aggressive as far as it's adapting and moving. One thing it doesn't change though is the fundamentals. They just don't change. So this is what I'll leave people with on this. Learn how your business operates. Learn cybersecurity. Learn data. Learn communication. Learn how to solve business problems, right? Don't become an expert in one tool. Become someone who can adapt and learn and lead through change, because change is where we're at now, right? We're talking about AI now, but I also want to say in 2 years, we're going to start talking about AI marrying quantum computing. So change is ever evolving, right? And cybersecurity is more important now than ever with all those changes in play. So the takeaway for me on this is the best technologies aren't the ones who know every answer. So amongst us, it's not, we don't have to know everything, but we have to keep learning and we have to adapt to those new technologies that are coming into play and look forward to what's coming, not just today, but what's really coming down the pipe towards us, right? Being ready for those changes as they continue to come, right? Make sure our environments are ready now for what's coming tomorrow while we're still implementing for today.
Thank you, Jeremy. Sean?
Yeah. When I was very young in my career, I had a mentor, and one of the things that I kind of walked away with that was the mentor is there to learn from the good and the bad. And one of the things that I definitely learned on was the adopt or die mentality and always stay a lifelong learner. Everything that you're going to learn today, Jeremy, you mentioned it, but everything you learn today is going to become obsolete as it evolves. And I think from a business case on the adopt or die mentality, let's look at Kodak, let's look at Blockbuster, right? We don't need to know or go into the details of that, but that's exactly what happened. It was adopt or die mentality. As far as the AI goes, I think it's part of one of the things that we've just got to embrace the changes. See AI as a partner. Don't let them do everything for you, and that's where, of course, that learning capability comes up. I use it more for the repetitive tasks, right? But for the bigger thinking and maybe some of the ideas, I'll use the AI. But for the bigger thinking, that's what I want to do on my own, right? I want to make sure that I've got it. I can do it, first of all. And then as a leader, you've got to be able to solve the business problems. And business problems aren't always going to be a technology problem. So keep that in mind. Solve business problems, and it's not always going to be a technology.
Yeah.
That's what I would leave with.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Sean, Jeremy. Great words of wisdom for the whole team and starting off in the tech space. And once again, thank you, Laura, Jeremy, Sean, Prabhu, Joe, for the great insights, the perspectives shared. I'm sure the audience enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. I'll turn it back over to Nitin from the AI CoreSpot team to wrap here at 12:30 Central Time.
Thank you. I know we are on top of the hour, so I don't want to take much of our time to closure. But thanks, John, for great moderation. You steered such a rich, focused conversation and make sure every voice in the panel had the space to shine. And Laura, Sean, Jeremy, Joe, Prabhu, honestly, the quality of the discussion has been exceptional. You didn't just share frameworks, you shared real experiences, challenges which is coming, real outcomes, how we can make it more interesting, and how we can solve the major thing, which is business problem. That was makes a conversation like this genuinely valuable, and I'm sure our audience felt that today. Thank you for that. For everyone who joined us live, thank you for giving your time today. And if you know someone who missed this session, do share it with them. The recording will be available shortly on AI CoreSpot YouTube channel. And today's session was also broadcasted live on LinkedIn Live. So it's already out there reaching a wider audience. This is just one conversation. We have a lot more in place. So stay connected with us. Visit our website, follow us on our social media handles, subscribe to our newsletter. You're always the first to know about our upcoming events, registrations, and the latest in tech which is happening. We also want to take a moment to sincerely thank our partners who have supported us throughout, and special mention to InfoVision and Digit 7 who have made this possible. Their commitment to pushing the boundaries of technology in this AI space is something we are deeply proud to be associated with. To everyone in our audience today, your engagement, your curiosity, and your presence is what makes AI CoreSpot as a platform what we are. Please continue to share our content, connect with us, bring your networks into this community. On behalf of the entire AI CoreSpot team, have a wonderful rest of your day, a productive week ahead, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Jay.